We all know the rhyme, the childish chant that simplifies a king's reign into a handful of words. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. It's a neat, tidy summary of King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. But what if this schoolyard jingle is the greatest lie ever told about the English monarchy? What if it's a carefully constructed curtain designed to hide a story far more terrifying? A story not of a king's fickle heart, but of a nation's soul being ripped apart. A story of a handsome, pious prince who became a bloated, paranoid monster. A man so desperate for a son that he would defy the Pope, declare himself a god in his own kingdom, and turn the executioner's axe into his most trusted political tool. The tale you think you know, the one of a romantic king searching for love, is a fairy tale. The truth is a nightmare of ambition, betrayal, and blood. It's the story of how one man's obsession plunged a country into a darkness from which it would take centuries to emerge, leaving behind secrets that are still being unearthed today. We're about to pull back that curtain and reveal the real Henry VIII. It's a journey into the heart of a tyrant. If you're ready for the truth and want to explore the darkest corners of history, make sure to subscribe to our channel and join the conversation in the comments below. What do you think was Henry's darkest secret? Let's begin where all good stories do, with the illusion of perfection. Picture a young King Henry VIII ascending to the throne in 1509. He isn't the obese, gout-ridden tyrant we see in portraits. He is a golden prince, the jewel of Europe, standing over 6 feet tall with a powerful athletic build and a sharp, intellectual mind. He is the very embodiment of a Renaissance king. He speaks multiple languages, composes music, writes poetry, and excels in the hunt and the joust. England, under his rule, is a secure, prosperous, and devoutly Catholic nation. His father, Henry VII, had ended the bloody wars of the Roses and left the kingdom stable and the treasury full. To seal this golden age, Henry marries his brother's widow, the beautiful and deeply pious Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the mighty Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. It is a match made in heaven, a union that solidifies England's place on the European stage. The Pope himself grants a special dispensation for the marriage, and all of Christendom celebrates. For nearly 2 decades, the reign is a spectacle of opulence and order. The court is a glittering hub of culture and power, filled with masks, banquets, and tournaments. Henry, a staunch defender of the Catholic faith, even writes a treatise denouncing Martin Luther and his Protestant Reformation, earning him the prestigious title Defender of the Faith from the Pope. To an outsider, and indeed to his own subjects, King Henry VIII is a model Christian monarch, blessed by God, ruling over a loyal and unified kingdom. He has a queen he loves, the respect of his peers, and the power of Rome at his back. Everything is exactly as it should be. It is a perfect, unshakable world. But beneath the polished floor of the royal court, a crack was beginning to form, a tiny fissure of doubt that would soon shatter the entire kingdom. The problem was simple, yet devastating for a monarch. Queen Catherine had failed to produce a male heir. After numerous pregnancies, miscarriages, and stillbirths, only one child survived, a daughter, Mary. In a world where a king's strength was measured by his ability to pass the crown to a son, this was a political catastrophe. The memory of the Wars of the Roses, a brutal civil war sparked by a disputed succession, was still fresh in the nation's memory. Henry became consumed by a single passage from the book of Leviticus. If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing, they shall be childless. He saw his lack of sons not as a biological failure, but as God's divine punishment. His perfect marriage was, in his mind, a cursed union. It is at this moment of spiritual crisis that a new figure emerges from the shadows of the court: Anne Boleyn. She was not like the other ladies. Educated in the sophisticated courts of France, she was witty, sharp-tongued, and possessed an alluring, dark-eyed intensity that captivated the king. Henry, used to getting whatever he wanted, desired her. But Anne, seeing the queen's predicament, refused to become another royal mistress destined to be cast aside. She played a revolutionary hand. She would be queen, or she would be nothing. This refusal ignited the king's obsession. What began as a theological quandary, the king's great matter, morphed into a brutal political crusade. Henry pleaded with the Pope for an annulment, but the Pope was effectively a prisoner of Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Rome would not yield, and so the Golden Prince began to transform. The defender of the faith, advised by a new circle of radical thinkers like Thomas Cromwell, started to entertain a shocking idea. What if he didn't need the Pope at all? The illusion of a pious, orderly king crumbled, revealing a man willing to burn down the entire established order to get what he wanted. The shockwaves were felt immediately. His loyal chancellor, Sir Thomas More, a man of unimpeachable integrity, resigned in horror. His powerful advisor, Cardinal Wolsey, who failed to secure the annulment, was stripped of his power and died in disgrace. The air in the court grew thick with fear. Whispering in corners became a capital offense. To oppose the king's will was no longer just treason against the crown. It was heresy against God, for Henry was about to make himself the new god of England. The story of this cataclysm is best seen through the eyes of the woman who started it all, Anne Boleyn. Her journey from a lady-in-waiting to the catalyst for revolution is a masterclass in ambition and a chilling lesson in the dangers of royal favor. For 7 long years, she was the king's shadow, the object of his all-consuming passion. She was not a passive pawn. She was an active player in the theological and political debates of the day. A devout reformist, she introduced Henry to radical Protestant texts, feeding his belief that a king was answerable only to God, not to a foreign bishop in Rome. She guided his hand, whispering strategies in his ear, helping him navigate the complex path to breaking with the Catholic Church. When Henry finally cast Catherine aside, exiling her from court and declaring their daughter Mary illegitimate, Anne took her place. In 1533, she was crowned Queen of England in a ceremony of unparalleled magnificence. She had won. She held the ultimate prize. But the victory was hollow. The English people, who loved the devout Catherine, hated her. They called her the Great Whore, the sorceress who had bewitched their king. And then came the ultimate failure. She did not give Henry the son he craved. She gave him a daughter, Elizabeth. With the birth of a girl, the king's infatuation began to curdle into resentment. The charming lover became a cold, impatient master. Anne, now trapped in the gilded cage she had fought so hard to enter, was surrounded by enemies. The old nobility despised her as a social climber. The remaining Catholics saw her as a heretic. And now, she was beginning to lose the only ally who mattered. She had to watch as Henry's eyes began to wander to one of her own ladies-in-waiting, the quiet, gentle Jane Seymour. Anne's famous wit now seemed like arrogance. Her confidence was reframed as shrewishness. Every move she made was scrutinized, every word twisted. She had risen to the highest peak, but living at the top meant a single misstep would lead to a fatal fall. She had shown the king that a queen could be set aside. She was about to learn that a queen could also be erased. The final escalation came with a speed and brutality that shocked even the most jaded European courts. Henry needed Anne gone, not just divorced, but utterly destroyed. An annulment would mean acknowledging his marriage to her was invalid, which would make their daughter Elizabeth illegitimate, a political inconvenience. But more than that, his pride, wounded by her failure to produce a son and her increasingly sharp tongue, demanded a more permanent solution. He wanted a clean slate with a new wife, Jane Seymour, and Anne's continued existence was a stain upon it. Thomas Cromwell, the king's ruthless chief minister, was given the task. The result was a legal and moral abomination. A plot was fabricated, a masterpiece of political terror. Queen Anne Boleyn was accused of the most heinous crimes imaginable: adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn, with whom she was accused of incest. The charges were ludicrous, the evidence non-existent, based on coerced confessions and the tortured testimony of a musician. It didn't matter. This was not a trial. It was a pre-scripted execution. The men were swiftly tried and condemned. Her brother George went to the scaffold, defending his sister's honor to the last. Then came Anne's turn. She faced her accusers with a dignity and courage that stunned the court, but the verdict was a foregone conclusion. She was found guilty of treason and sentenced to death. Henry, in a final act of twisted mercy, granted her the privilege of being executed not with a common axe, but by a skilled swordsman summoned from France. On the morning of May 19, 1536, as Anne calmly walked to the scaffold, it is said that Henry was miles away, dressed for hunting, waiting for the sound of the cannon that would signal her death. The moment it fired, the king, who had torn his country apart for her, declared, "The deed is done. Uncouple the hounds and let us follow the sport." The next day, he was formally betrothed to Jane Seymour. The message was clear and terrifying. The king was now the supreme head of the church and the state. His will was law. He had executed a divinely anointed queen on the most transparent of lies. No one was safe. He had tasted absolute power, and he had found that he liked it. The charming Renaissance prince was dead, and in his place stood a tyrant. Henry got his son. Jane Seymour gave him Prince Edward, but she died from complications of childbirth just days later, plunging the king into a deep grief. Yet his reign was far from over, and the pattern was set. The kingdom he left behind was one scarred by his legacy. The dissolution of the monasteries, a move to seize the immense wealth of the Catholic Church, was a brutal campaign of cultural vandalism. Priceless libraries were burned, magnificent buildings were torn down for scrap, and thousands of monks and nuns were cast out, changing the face of the English landscape forever. His subsequent marriages were a tragic epilogue to his great obsession. There was the political farce with Anne of Cleves, the German princess he divorced after 6 months, famously calling her the Flanders mare. Then came the reckless passion for the young Catherine Howard, another of Anne Boleyn's cousins. When she was accused of being unchaste, this time with evidence, the cycle of blood repeated itself. She too was beheaded, a terrified teenager on the scaffold. His final wife, the twice-widowed Catherine Parr, was a steadying influence, a kind nurse to an aging, diseased king. But even she was not safe, narrowly escaping a plot by her enemies to have her arrested for heresy. The religious turmoil Henry unleashed did not die with him. His son, Edward VI, was a radical Protestant. His first daughter, Mary I, was a fanatical Catholic who burned hundreds of Protestants at the stake, earning the name Bloody Mary. It was only with his second daughter, the one born of the woman he had executed, that England found stability. Queen Elizabeth I, the unwanted girl, became one of the nation's greatest monarchs, a masterful politician who forged a new English identity from the fires her father had started. Henry's desperate, bloody quest for a male heir ironically paved the way for two of England's most powerful queens to take the throne. And so the question remains, echoing through the centuries: who was the real Henry VIII? A lustful monster who destroyed lives for his own pleasure? Or a visionary king who, through brutal necessity, liberated his nation from foreign control and laid the foundation for a modern state? Perhaps the most unsettling truth is that the archives still hold their secrets, and the man himself remains an enigma, a chilling reminder of how the desires of one powerful man can reshape the world. What part of his story shocks you the most? The break with Rome or the execution of his own wife? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden chapters